Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to 6 of the Best, where I pick 6 films from an actor that I think are noteworthy performances. Today, a legend of the game, but an actor that it took me a while to kind of appreciate his work. It's Tatsuya Nakadai, who is one of the 3 kind of Japanese titans, along with Toshiro Mifune and Takeshi Shimura. Obviously Mifune was born in China, but as far as Japanese cinema, it's the 3-headed monster. Now, because I was, and still am, such a Kurosawa nut, Nakadai was only really familiar to me at the start of my film watching journey for 2 films, one in the early 60s and one in the 80s, and that was kind of my reference to Nakadai, because obviously Mifune was casting a huge shadow, as was Shimura. I now think that perhaps Shimura is actually the better actor between himself and Mifune. I think he's got better range. But then you could argue that Nakadai might be the best out of the 3, and that's only really coming from watching the films of another Japanese titan director that doesn't get as much credit, and that's Masaki Kobayashi. So if you are, like I was, only really familiar with Nakadai through a couple of Kurosawa films, then he's much more than that. He's still alive at the age of 91, born in 1932. He got into films a little bit later than Mifune and Shimura. So one of his first kind of major roles is the first film that I'll start with. I could have picked a couple of his earlier roles, but I'm going to go with Black River, which is by Masaki Kobayashi. This is 1956. This is part of just a wonderful set, an Eclipse DVD set by Criterion, Masaki Kobayashi Against the System. If you can get your hands in this, it is essential. Yes, Kobayashi had far more famous films than these, but these are all belters, as you might say. The Thick Walled Room, I Will Buy You, Black River, and The Inheritance. Now I could have picked The Inheritance, because Nakadai gives a wonderful performance in that as well. But in Black River, he does play a bit of a scumbag. He does play somebody with not a lot of morals, somebody who, like, you know, arranges an assault on a woman so he can step in and be the hero and then take advantage of that situation. But you've always got this kind of look in Nakadai's eyes that he can be somewhat dangerous. I know Mifune has a reputation of being kind of, you know, feral at times and given kind of animalistic performances. Obviously Rashomon is the most explicit version of that. But as we'll get to, you know, Nakadai could be fairly nasty and wolfish. himself. And in this one, which is a story of corruption, again, it's Kobayashi, so it's political, about post-war Japan. It's about the sale of property, or the coercion of the sale of property. There's a love triangle where Nakadai is the most acute of the angles of the three. But you can kind of tell he has that magnetic presence that he would have throughout his career. So to go from a kind of small-ish picture, Black River, to the second film or films on the list, of course, The Human Condition, which is this wonderful Arrow Academy. Again, if you can get your hands on this, it's worth paying the extra for, or even just get the normal standard edition, because this is a phenomenal piece of work. And for an actor to pretty much go from, not necessarily obscurity, but to go from not a lot to The Human Condition, and one of the greatest performances of all time, in one of the greatest films of all time. It is crazy, as friend of the channel SGS Arts has said in the past, that The Human Condition wasn't in the most recent Sight and Sound poll, you know, top 100 greatest films of all time. It is ridiculous that The Human Condition isn't in it. Nakadai's performance in this is absolutely sensational as Kaji, as we follow his journey from kind of naive character who has kind of political beliefs but has never seen those kind of ideologies in practice. It's a film about how any ism, no matter what it is not good, as we're seeing all around the world. People hate each other, and that's the only pretty much good thing people are good for. Not a good thing, but that's the only thing that people are good for in the war. And The Human Condition is basically about how isms don't work, regardless of what those isms are, and taken to the extreme, they certainly don't work. But as a central character, you know, he's not perfect, he makes mistakes, those mistakes have huge consequences, and people get killed because of those mistakes. And his view in the world and his view on the political views and the philosophical views that he had are challenged and change throughout the 9.5 hours of this film, or 3 films. It's an absolutely sensational performance. And again, you could make the argument that Mifune and Shimura never had a performance like this in their quiver of acting arrows. And in this one, Nakadai certainly hits the bullseye. It's a stunning work, and it's got a stunning central performance. You're immediately invested in his character, even though, as I said, he's not perfect. You know, in the hands of another director, he would perhaps be more polished around the edges. You know, it would be this kind of saintly figure, but he's not. He has problems, he has issues, he has flaws. It's a sensational work, and a sensational central performance. So that's really between 59 and 61, I guess. Then in 61, this is the first film that I ever saw him in, and obviously he doesn't have a big part in it, but he still makes a hell of an impression, and that's Kurosawa's Yojimbo. So again, this is obviously Toshiro Mifune's film, but Nakadai comes in at the end as the cousin or brother who has a gun, which obviously changes the game when everybody else has swords. And this is where we get a much more physical Nakadai, Nakadai with swagger, who does have that kind of wolfish grin to him. His eyebrows almost get bigger, his eyes, you can say it's a little bit cartoonish, but not in a bad way. You can tell that he's, out of all the kind of villains in the film, you know, he is the most villainous. But again, it's one of those things that, yes, it's Mifune's film, but if you're only going to get a limited screen time in the last, say, 20 minutes of the film, Nakadai makes the most of it and does create a wonderful character and a wonderful impression. And he's just phenomenal, which leads to another phenomenal performance in a phenomenal film. It's Kobayashi again, and this is Harakiri. I do need to rewatch this. It's been a while since I've seen it. But again, this is Kobayashi's fairly savage, satirical takedown in the whole code of the samurai. And again, Nakadai gives one of his best performances in the central role as a character who's going to certainly expose the whole system. And it's just, again, a gorgeous film by Kobayashi, which is kind of a given. Again, this wasn't in the top 100 either. It is kind of ridiculous that Shizlovsky had 0 entries and Kobayashi had 0 entries. It does kind of make a mockery of lists like that. Whereas films are made in the last 5 years got in. This is just a phenomenal piece of work. See it on a screen as big as you can. This is just absolutely wonderful. Obviously Takashi Miike did a remake, which is fairly by the numbers and watchable, but nobody's ever really going to watch that as opposed to watching Kobayashi's original. And Nakadai is a huge reason for this. Next we're going to go to 1966, and again another film that I really need to watch again as it's been too long. This is Sword of Doom, which is another samurai film, which this time co-stars Toshiro Mifune. So it's almost as if they've swapped places from Yojimbo. This is dark and nihilistic. This is about obsession. This is about going full bore evil. Again, part of the Hagakure is, you know, already think yourself to be dead. Obviously Jim Jarmusch references it in Ghost Dog, the fact that, you know, you should be able to finish tasks even if you had your head cut off, and you should treat yourself as though you're dead already. And Nakadai just plays a character who's almost possessed and obsessed and descends into madness as violence and pure evil overtake him. Again, I talked earlier about, you know, the wolfish nature sometimes of Nakadai's face, and again in Sword of Doom, if he was a slightly, or he was a bad wolf in Yojimbo, he's the big bad wolf in Sword of Doom. It's phenomenal. The last 20 minutes are just kinetic and energetic. Nakadai literally is possessed at the end of the film. It's a savage film, kind of underrated in a strange way, but Nakadai is absolutely phenomenal, and like Mifune, he's best as an absolute force of nature in the film. And finally we're going to get to, you know, the second of the films that I kind of saw of Nakadai from Yojimbo to Ran. by Kurosawa in 1985. And again, I kind of unfairly judged Nakadai because at the time when I saw Ran, and a few years after, until I got into Nakadai's other films, I always had the thing of, Mifune should have played the lead, not Nakadai. He should have played Lord Hideyotora, and what the film would have been like with Toshiro Mifune. And I think that I was being unfair to Nakadai, and I apologise to Nakadai if he's watching this video. It is a wonderful performance, and he really captures the madness of a man who thinks he's doing the right thing, but he's actually causing complete chaos and carnage and death. And strangely enough, that can affect somebody. So instead of being a Debbie Downer and thinking, oh, I wonder what the film would have been like with Toshiro Mifune in that role, I have grown to appreciate Nakadai's performance in that role by himself. So Nakadai, as I said, he's an actor that had early impressions of him, and they were probably overshadowed by my love of Mifune and Shimura. But as I have grown older and more sensible, theoretically, Nakadai's an absolute titan. And as I said, you can make the argument that he's the greatest actor out of the three, and that's hard to say, being like a Mifune and Shimura disciple. Not that they have a cult or anything like that, but again, as I said, for things like the human condition, Nakadai is like peerless in that regard, because that is such a phenomenal performance. And even as an extra, he played the voice of the devil in Belladonna of Sadness, the wonderful Japanese animation. He actually played the devil. So that's Tatsuya Nakadai, and my 6 of his best. Please let me know in the comments your 6 favourite or the 6 best Nakadai performances, and hopefully you'll join me again for more videos. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.